Have you ever looked at the government budget and felt like you were trying to read a completely different language? Well, guess what? You're probably more fluent than you think. Because really, at its core, a nation's budget works on a lot of the same ideas you use every single day. So let's break it all down.
So let's just start with this one big question. How is a government's budget actually like your own? I mean, if you can get your head around this one idea, all the crazy numbers and policies that come later, they start to make a whole lot more sense.
Think about it. You plan for your income, your rent, maybe some savings, and yeah, a few splurges here and there. Well, a government does the exact same thing, just, for the entire country. The budget is really just the nation's financial roadmap for the year.
Okay, so the official fancy name for this roadmap is the annual financial statement. And it's not just a good idea, it's actually required by the Constitution. All it does is lay out the government's best guess for all the money it expects to bring in, they call that receipts, and all the money it plans to spend, that's expenditures, for the whole financial year, from April 1st to March 31st. But why even have this plan? I mean, can't the free market just take care of everything? Well, the short answer is nope, not really. Turns out there are 3 really big economic jobs that only the government can do. And these jobs are the whole reason a budget even needs to exist in the first place. All right, so what are these big 3 jobs? They're called allocation, redistribution, and stabilization. I know, they sound super academic, right? But stick with me, because they deal with really important real-world stuff. Making sure we have essentials, trying to keep things fair, and stopping the economy from going totally off the rails. Let's take them one by one. Okay, first up, allocation. Just think for a second about the difference between, say, a shirt you buy at a store and a public park. That shirt, that's a private good. Once you buy it, it's yours. I can't wear it at the same time. But a park, that's a public good. You can be there, I can be there, tons of people can be there, and it doesn't really stop anyone else from enjoying it. And that simple difference, it creates a huge economic problem. And that problem has a name. It's called the free rider problem. I mean, think about something like national defense. If you're going to be protected, whether you chip in or not, why would you voluntarily pay for it? You wouldn't, right? You'd just free ride on everyone else's contribution. And that, right there, is exactly why the government has to step in, collect taxes, and fund these essential public goods for everyone. All right, job number 2 is redistribution. This is where the government, through the budget, tries to make the distribution of income in the country a little more, well, what society considers fair. They do this with things like a progressive tax system, where people who earn more pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes, and then use that money for programs that help others. It's all about adjusting the financial playing field a bit. And that brings us to the 3rd big job, stabilization. Look, economies are a bit like roller coasters, right? They have their ups, the booms, and their downs, the busts. The budget is one of the government's most powerful tools to try and smooth out that ride. So when the economy is in a slump and unemployment is high, the government can ramp up its spending to get things moving again. And when things are overheating and prices are rising too fast, that's inflation, it can pull back on spending to cool things down. It's all about finding that balance. Okay, so that's the why. We now know the 3 big jobs the budget is supposed to do. So the next logical question is, how? Where in the world does all this money actually come from? So the budget is basically split into 2 big buckets. You've got the revenue account and the capital account. Honestly, the easiest way to think about it is this. The revenue account is like your checking account. It's for all your regular day-to-day income and expenses. The capital account, that's more like your savings or investment account. It deals with the big stuff, long-term assets and debts. So let's dive into the income side first, what the government calls receipts. First, you have revenue receipts. This is like the government's regular paycheck. It's the money that comes in consistently, mostly from things like taxes. And this is key. It doesn't create any debt for the future. Then you've got capital receipts. These are more like one-off events. Think of it like taking out a loan or selling something valuable you own. These receipts either create a debt you have to pay back later, or they reduce your assets, like selling off a government-owned company. So if we look a little closer at that regular paycheck, the revenue receipts, the main sources are pretty much what you'd expect. Of course, there's tax revenue. That's the big one, stuff like income tax, corporate tax, GST. And then there's non-tax revenue. This is money from other places, like profits the government makes from companies it owns, or fees it charges for certain services. All right, so that's the money coming in. Now let's flip the coin and look at the other side, government spending. Where does all that money go? And hey, no surprise here, spending is also split into those exact same 2 buckets. You've got revenue expenditure. This is the government's daily and weekly bills. We're talking about the costs of just keeping the lights on, paying salaries, giving out subsidies, and making interest payments on old debts. And then you have capital expenditure. This is the big picture stuff. It's spending on investments that are meant to last for years, creating assets like new roads, schools, hospitals, all that foundational infrastructure. So, what are the government's biggest daily bills? Well, one of the most shocking ones is just paying the interest on money it's already borrowed. In fact, a lot of the time, this is the single biggest expense on the list. After that, you've got the other heavy hitters: defense spending, subsidies for things like food and fertilizer, and of course, paying the salaries and pensions for millions of government employees. Okay, so this all brings us to probably the most important question of all. We've seen where the money comes from and where it goes, but how do we know if the budget is actually healthy? What are the vital signs we should be looking at? Well, the most basic health check is something called the budget deficit. And the concept is super simple. A deficit is just what happens when the government spends more money than it brings in. That's it. But to really get into the weeds, we need to look at a specific number called the fiscal deficit. Now, here's the absolute key thing to remember about this number. The fiscal deficit tells you the grand total of new money the government has to borrow that year just to cover its bills. It's the bottom line, the total shortfall. Okay, but we can get even more specific with another number, the revenue deficit. Now, remember our checking account analogy? The revenue deficit tells you the shortfall just in that day-to-day checking account. And think about what that means. This is the amount of money the government has to borrow just to pay for its normal, everyday running costs. And this is where we can spot a really big red flag. This quote from our source really hits the nail on the head when it comes to the danger here. So what does that actually mean? It means you're borrowing money not to build something for the future, not to invest. You're borrowing just to pay this month's bills. It's like taking out a loan not to renovate your kitchen, but just to buy this week's groceries. It's not a sustainable path. Because at the end of the day, a budget is never, ever just a spreadsheet full of numbers. It's really a moral document. It's a statement of priorities. It shows you exactly what a country chooses to invest in, who it decides to help, and what kind of future it's trying to build for itself. So the question I want to leave you with is this. When you really look at a nation's budget, what does it tell you about what that nation truly values?